Welcome to With All Due Respect. This is a podcast for women over 40 who are looking for sane, frank advice about their health and wellness, especially through and after menopause. I'm Amanda Thebe, a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and the author of the best-selling book, Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. I'd love you to join me every week as I chew the fat with some fab guests on hot topics that directly impact you. I also know the power of conversation is lost, and there's nothing better than sitting down for a natter with your mate and putting the world to rights. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with this podcast. We'll really get to know my guests, warts and all. I've made it my mission to help you by exploding a few myths and presenting you with plain, simple facts. These inspiring conversations will hopefully empower you to be a healthy, strong, resilient bitch, just like me. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review, and then visit me at amandathebe.com. And now let's get started on today's show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to With All Due Respect. My name is Amanda Thebe. It's so good to be back here for season 2, and I am kicking off the first episode of season 2 with Emily McDowell. So Emily McDowell is a writer, illustrator, speaker, teacher, and entrepreneur. And she is fiercely committed to not doing all of those things at the same time. And we're actually going to talk about that during the interview today. You probably know her as the founder of the stationery brand Em & Friends, which used to be called Emily McDowell Studio, making cards and gifts for the relationships we really have. She also co-authored with Dr. Kelly Crow and illustrated the book, There Is No Good Card for This: What to Say and Do When Life Gets Scary, Awful, and Unfair to People You Love. Her work's been featured everywhere, by the way, including Good Morning America, BBC News, and NPR. And in 2022, Em & Friends was acquired, and Emily now serves as an outside consultant while she figures out what she's going to do next. And so while you're figuring that out, thank you for finding the time to come onto the show now. So let's just talk about how we connected, right? Because I'd followed your work forever, loved it, bought cards online. And then you reached out to me and went, hey, Amanda, I'm in perimenopause. So what led to us being connected? Can you sort of fill us in on those gaps, please, Emily?
Yes, I'm trying to remember, which is also symptom number 17 of perimenopause. So, take that with a grain of salt.
Okay, I'll give you a quick reminder. You were just launching your cards.
That's right. Okay. So yes, we were just launching our cards. So yes, so I am 46 and I have been experiencing the lovely symptoms of perimenopause since I was 38. And about a year and a half ago, I started talking about it on Instagram for the first time. And when I look back on this, it feels weird that it took me that long to talk about, because I am known for talking about stuff, right? And I have a pretty candid, open book, kind of a personal view of the world. And this is the thing that's been going on for me for a long time. And for whatever reason, it just never really occurred to me to take it public, so to speak. I talked to friends
about. To say those things out loud, right?
Yes, to say those things out loud in a public way. And I was inspired to do so after a friend of mine posted about being thrown into overnight menopause after having a hysterectomy. And she started talking, she did a post that was just like, oh my God, what is happening? They didn't tell me this was going to happen. Here are all the things that's going on with my body. What is this? And then the responses from people reading her post saying, oh my gosh, wait, what? That can happen? What is this? What the realization that, whoa, what are we doing? We need to be talking about this. And so her post inspired me to write a post just about my own personal experience and say, hey, FYI, this is a thing. It's been happening to me, since 2016. And it's been pretty debilitating on and off. And like, let's talk about it. And the response to that online was pretty wild. I mean, it was one of my more engaged with, commented on posts that I've ever done. And that led to us deciding at Em & Friends that we wanted to do a small collection of menopause and perimenopause cards, because our whole...
Which, by the way, are hilarious.
Oh,
like, they were so good. They're so real. And it's completely your style, isn't it? You're open, reflective, candid, but funny.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, our whole brand, right, is about talking about the things that we sometimes struggle to talk about. We kind of are best known for our empathy cards, which address illness and grief and loss in a way that doesn't feel pandery and that doesn't feel like just the platitudes, and that really helps people who are going through stuff feel seen and heard. And that came from my own experiences as a cancer survivor. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 24, and really, really deeply noticed at the time that there were really no good cards for the get well soon card had a long way to go. And B, that this was a time when people really didn't know what to say, that grief and illness and hard things tend to be a time when we all get afraid of saying the wrong thing, or we don't know what to do. And so there were no greeting cards out there that really helped with that. And so we launched empathy cards in 2015, and that was kind of what the brand has been most known for. And so these menopause cards really are a kind of a sister to those in a way.
Yeah, and they're good because you're so right when you say there's no pandering in there. And we do hear lots of platitudes. And then on the other side of it, we hear lots of like sickly positivity, the toxic positivity that's and so I know that you find a really good balance. But can I just rewind, because there's so much good stuff that I want to go back to. So I actually didn't realize that your perimenopause started at 38. Now, is that anything to do with the fact that you previously did have cancer? Or, I mean, why do we know why you went into it so early? Because I think actually I was about 38, because menopause to me is the most retrospective time of our life ever. We don't know while we're in it. We know when we look back, right? Mm-hmm. My last child was when I was 38, and shit just started changing, and I never realized what it was. It didn't really impact me till about the age of 42. So I had about 4 years of feeling meh, but then quite a long time feeling like really bad. So, so what did it look like for you? Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So for me, when I had my treatment, and now this was in the year 2000, 2001, at its conclusion, the oncologist said to me, oh, and by the way, it was kind of like a parting message as I was walking out the door, like, oh, by the way, you might have problems with fertility and you might go into menopause earlier than most people will, or than you might have otherwise had you not had this treatment. But we honestly don't know. So like, basically good luck, but just like heads up. And I was like, okay, thanks. And I'm 25. So I'm like, just get me out of here.
Also that doesn't feel important, right?
It doesn't feel important, and it doesn't feel relevant to my life at the moment, which there were so many sort of immediate hills to climb in my life at the time that I was like, I'm not going to even worry about this right now. I'm not going to think about it. I will cross that bridge, as they say. And so when I was 38, I started getting really heavy periods. That was the first symptom that I noticed. Was my periods had always been pretty light, pretty manageable, like not a big deal. And then all of a sudden it was like I was in someone else's body. And, to the point at which like I started Googling, because I was like, am I dying? Like, what's happening? Do I need to go to a doctor?
Why have I just birthed an alien? Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Am I okay? And I came across information that said, this is often an early sign of perimenopause. And I remembered, I remember, that conversation where they said this might come early, because I, in my head, was not anywhere near thinking. I was still thinking menopause in your 40s, maybe 50. 50 was the age I had in my head.
And was
And
it something you were actually sort of aware of, as in you knew what to expect, or it was just a thing you knew that we went through?
didn't know what to expect, knew it was a thing that we went through, didn't know that it could last. And for most people, the perimenopause period lasts as long as it does. Didn't know any of that stuff. Just knew around 50, nights like sweating, hot flashes and rage, and 50 years old. Those were the things that I understood about perimenopause and menopause at the time. And I reached out to my mom and to my aunts, and I only know my history on my mom's side of the family, and said, what was your experience like? Did this come early? Was it bad? And they said, we don't know, because in our generation, they just put us on Premarin, as soon as we turned 40 or whenever it was. Like none of us really know what our experience would have been like, because we were just on very large doses of hormones, the kind of hormones that they don't really prescribe in the US anymore, to my knowledge.
And right? So that was obviously prior to the 2002 sort of like study that came out. So your mum and aunt predated that, right? Okay.
Oh yes. My mom is in her late 70s. So she would have been going through this in the 80s. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not very good at math, by the way, you could tell, because I wasn't prepared to do it then. I'm just like, was she or wasn't she?
Is your mom 26? Yeah. No, she...
Shut up. Okay. Let's just move on. So, all right, you have these heavy periods and you think, okay, this could be perimenopause. So what does it look like next for you? I mean, I don't know what you did as far as like treatment, being a cancer survivor, like how that looked when you had the conversations with your doctors. What happened?
Yeah. So the other thing that the doctor said to me in parting was, oh, and P.S., you can never take estrogen, or you should never take estrogen, because my cancer was lymphoma, but I had a tumor in my chest. And so I had radiation to my chest, which means that I have a higher than normal risk of breast cancer. And so since I turned 35, I've been getting a screening every 6 months, and I get MRIs, and it's a whole thing. And so they said, because you have this elevated risk of breast cancer, and because we think that there's this connection between hormone therapy and breast cancer risk, it's not worth it for you. You should never do it. And so I said, okay, again, file in the mental Rolodex of like something to not worry about now. Yeah. And so I had these heavy periods. And then over the next couple of years, right around turning 40, I started having just, there's 34 possible symptoms, and I think I had 30 of them. And I was soaking through 3 t-shirts at night. Just these horrible night sweats. I would keep a stack of shirts. Like I bought those sweat wicking sheets on Amazon. There was a day or two every month where I felt like I couldn't go to work because I was too crazy. Like I was a human liability just walking around. Like I couldn't talk to my coworkers and my staff and and my family. It was like the mood swings and the rage and the fatigue, and I headaches and like exhaustion. I was miserable.
And did I remember you telling me you struggled with depression as well?
Mm-hmm. And I'd always struggled with depression.
Right. Yes.
I was a teenager, and that was getting worse. And I was also getting anxiety, like strange anxiety about specific things, like being a passenger in a car, like someone else is driving would give me anxiety, like, which was totally new and like, what? And so I started to do research about perimenopause and started to learn like, oh, this is what my body is doing, and I went to my doctor and she was like, I don't know. Yeah. Like you should look into the diet and lifestyle stuff, because you probably shouldn't take hormone therapy. I don't really know. And so I drastically changed. I stopped eating refined sugar. I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped drinking caffeine, and I was already gluten-free. And so I got deeper into meditation, really tried to reduce my stress, like basically did sort of a life overhaul in 2018 as a way of trying to feel better, because it was really debilitating. And
it's like the things you can do take control when everything
Yes.
else feels out of control, right?
Yes.
Like what are the tangible actions I can do today? And did it help? Did
It
any of those?
did. So the
Yeah.
crazy thing is that it made a huge difference. I mean, like, it made a massive difference for 5 years. It worked. Like, and so I didn't eat sugar for, four and a half years. I ate it maybe once every 2 months. I didn't drink. I didn't, I was so careful about caffeine. Like, I did all the stuff. And it sounds like a prison sentence, but I have to say that because it was working and because I was feeling so much better, it actually didn't feel that hard. It just
Oh,
felt
I
like,
agree completely. It's exactly that, isn't it? Like for me, alcohol triggered migraines, so I stopped
yep,
drinking.
yep,
And people are like, "Isn't it hard to stop drinking?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's worse having a migraine." So it's an easy
totally.
option. Same with you, right?
It's
The
worse
the
feeling like
downside,
garbage all the
yeah,
time,
yeah. Oh,
and so that was so yeah, like it actually worked, and it worked very well. And then just this last year, about a year ago, stuff started coming back, like night sweats and hot flashes, and my sleeping was just a disaster. Like, I was just not sleeping, and I've never been a great sleeper, but this was like just awake all night, falling asleep and then waking up at 3 and not going back to sleep. And it was really, I felt like I had hit a different stage.
yeah,
Um,
probably had. I
and I
was going to
had,
say,
because
yeah.
my last period was the end of December of 2021. So right now it's September of 22. So about 9 months. And so, like, this might be the end, maybe. I don't know.
No, don't jinx it. Don't jinx
Don't
it. No, I'm
jinx
just
it. But
joking.
like, I don't, so I don't know. Right. And,
And it's well documented that the late stages of perimenopause can be the most challenging for a lot of women. There's a big seismic shift happens, and even the year or so after menopause, but then within that 3 to 5 year window after menopause, women start to feel back to normal again. It's all of this is well documented. So what you're saying isn't a surprise, but it's still horrible when you're like, I've been doing all this, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling like crap again.
yeah.
So okay, so how are you sort of like making it work now? Like, I know you've done some actual stuff like setting. I want you to talk about setting the boundaries, pulling away from things that are making you more stressed as well.
I have also been, over the last couple of years, in a big life shift, life reevaluation in general. And part of that has to do with really recognizing what in my life was making me miserable without realizing it. So there are the things that are obviously making you miserable. Those are clear, right? But then the things that, under the guise of like, I have to do this, or this is required, or people want this from me, and so therefore I will do it, or these, a lot of these things that I felt were necessary. And I've been doing this sort of ongoing evaluation of like, is this really necessary? Or have I just been conditioned to believe that it's necessary? And
like an obligation, you mean?
I took it away. Yeah. And is this something that I actually like doing? Or am I doing this because I feel that I should, or that I have to, or that I'm afraid of what will happen if I stop doing it, but it doesn't actually add any joy or happiness to my life? And it turns out there were a lot of those things in my life.
Okay, such as, because I know people are going to be listening to this going,
well,
okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Tell me.
Social media for me has been a really big one. And, I've been a sort of quasi-public figure for about 10 years. And I used to run the original M and Friends Instagram account. It was me. It was my personal account that then became the brand's account. And so that I posted there daily, to their Instagram and Facebook for 7 or 8 years, something like that, and then that was like 500,000 followers. And it was very engaged. Like, people were very, very engaged there. And then in 2018, I stepped away from running that day to day because we had to figure out how to turn it over to a team. And I started my own Instagram, and I started posting there all the time. And I came to realize over the last couple of years that it actually wasn't, that I would open up the app and just feel sort of a sense of dread. And that's never a good sign. and it was because I was also fortunate to be in the position of making a salary from my job at M and Friends. And so I wasn't relying on social media to make a living. I was just doing it to do it.
And did you then sort of stop and go, well, what's the point?
I did. I stopped and went, what's the point? And and where my mind went was, oh my gosh, but you're not going to be doing, you're not going to be doing M and Friends forever. You're going to need something in the future. You are going to need to stay relevant. You're going to, like, what if you can't just stop? You can't just go, like, this is all, everything is so on demand and in your face. And if you go away, then it's going to be so hard to come back. And how will you do this? Like, how will you be a person? How will you make a living? And I had to just say, like, shut up. I don't know. But the answer is not force yourself to do something every day that you don't want to do anymore. Like, I have to be able to think of another way. And even if I can't think of it right now, the answer is not continue to show up and just grind yourself into, contort and to fit into something that doesn't feel good.
It wasn't serving you at all.
And it isn't serving, it felt like it didn't feel like a reciprocal relationship because it wasn't part of my job. It wasn't part of, it wasn't like, oh, this is marketing or this is a community. It just felt like, what am I doing? And not to say that I've made so many amazing connections, like with you on Instagram. It has good, there is actually so much good that has come into my life because of it. And so it's been a bit complicated to say, like, oh, I don't have this love for social anymore. I don't, this is not contributing to my peace, because it has brought so much good to me. And at the same time, I've also noticed that it really, when I step away from it, I feel more calm. I feel more clear. I feel less urgent. I feel just more at home in myself. And so that's been, stepping away and sort of dipping back in every once in a while and then being like, oh,
But then also being really very frank. I mean, and saying to people, this might suck. I might go again. I don't know if I want to do this. I love it. That's what we need. We need a little bit more honesty like that. Okay. So like, what can I sort of shift it a little bit? Because I know you've done some things as well that like are part of my world. So when we've spoken before, you're very much a proponent of, you started strength training.
Yes.
You like that. I want to hear how that's going. I want you to talk about your pelvic health as well, because that's another thing that you've been really open about, and myself too. And these have both been sort of game changers for us. So
yes, there's 3 things that I actually want to talk about that have been game changers for me this year. One is strength training. So I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary of working out with a trainer. And I do small group training twice a week. That's strength and conditioning. And this is the longest I have ever stuck with a training program or a trainer. I've had many trainers in my life. And normally my pattern has been, I do something and then 3 or 4 months goes by. And then I think I'm not seeing the results that I want, which in the past were, I want to look different. I am doing this because I want to look different. And I didn't get those when I wouldn't get those results, I would say like, oh, this is hard and it costs money and I don't want to do it. And screw this. It doesn't work. And when I started a year ago, my goals were really different. I was doing it because I wanted to feel better. And I did a sort of suspension of disbelief with myself, which was like, look, if you end up looking different, cool. But this in no way is it. The intention here is not like, I'm not going to measure my progress by any physical body changes except for like actual strength. I can measure my progress through like how much weight I can lift or how much endurance I have, or like, can I do a hike that I couldn't do a year ago because it was too hard? And
how are you feeling? Yeah. And so when we see women and men, but obviously I'm more geared towards women on this show that start strength training, and moving it away from the aesthetic vanity standpoint towards health goals, we see that the longevity is there. It's a real hard shift to do, though, because we've been conditioned to care about how we look and to try and change into something that we're possibly not. And then when you stop, I think you need to go through a bit of a rough time to make it be for health goals. Like you and I both had a bit of a traumatic time through perimenopause. And I really was like, to me, it's all about how good I feel now. I want to feel good and strong and capable. And I want to feel really epic in everything I do. And the strength training sort of leads you that way. And it's just been so good for you, hasn't it?
It's been so good for me. I really highly recommend it. And I highly recommend, if you don't love your trainer, find a different trainer. There are so many trainers and there are so many ways to do training. And if the person that you're working with, if you're not connecting with how they communicate or what they're doing or what, find a different person. It doesn't mean that training isn't for you. It doesn't mean that lifting weights isn't for you. It just means that there's a better trainer for you out there.
Find a good fit. And I like the fact that you talked about the small group training, because sometimes almost like finding your connection in that community can be one of the reasons you keep going back. Yeah.
They're my friends. I mean, I now have this group, this little group of, friends, and it makes we're all different fitness levels, but it just feels really supportive, and it feels, it doesn't feel compare-y, and it doesn't feel, it just feels good. It feels really different than, I don't know, working out in my 20s or, it feels really different. And I was absolutely the least fit person, in that group for a long time. And in some ways I still am. And that's okay. Like at first it was really hard for me. And I really struggled the first couple of months with feeling inadequate and feeling like I was just really out of shape and feeling like, oh, they're doing all this other stuff that I can't do and I have to modify everything. And then I don't know, I just kept doing it. And then something shifted where I stopped really caring. And it wasn't about what are they doing? What am I doing? And more about like, I'm here and I'm doing this. And having stuck with it, it's been a year as of last week. And so having stuck with it for a year, then, turned into, just the continuing of the showing up has also been really big for me.
Sure, for sure. It's amazing. The consistency is where the magic happens, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two things?
Yeah. So one of them I really wanted to talk about because it turns out that I got bad information 20 years ago about not being able to take hormone therapy. And it wasn't bad information deliberately. It was just that the doctors didn't know. It was right after that study had come out and everyone was really scared and no one knew really anything. And so they were being like hyper cautious and just saying like, anyone with any breast cancer, anything, just stay away. And about a year ago, I was struggling so much and I had been doing all this supplementation. I've been doing, all of my diet stuff, I was working with a naturopath, like nothing was working. And I reached out to Dr. Heather Hirsch, who runs the menopause care clinic at Harvard, and I found through Instagram.
Yeah. Heather's a great resource, by the way.
She's an amazing resource. She's on Instagram. And I ended up talking with her about, because I said, like, is this true? Can I not take estrogen? And she said, I actually don't think that's true. And here's the research. And so she has a masterclass that she offers. And I ultimately ended up taking that masterclass. And through that education, and it's the same education that she uses to educate doctors about, it's all about hormone therapy and the realities of hormone therapy and all of the options and and so she took that information and created a course and I'm not a paid, I paid for it. I did it. She created a class that effectively gave me the tools to be able to walk into any doctor and say, this is what I want. And this is why I want it. And please give it to me. And if that didn't work, going to plan B, C, D, E, F. So there is a lot of different ways to get estrogen, progesterone. There's a lot of, different delivery methods, different doses, different all kinds of stuff. And I looked at all the research and saw the same studies that all the doctors see and ultimately drew the conclusion that I drew was I think that for me, taking estrogen is actually going to be better. Like, I don't think based on what the actual research shows, I don't think that there's an elevated breast cancer risk. And not only that, not sleeping is really bad for you.
It's very risky.
All of these other things that I was experiencing as a result of my symptoms that are now that taking estrogen, which I've been doing for the last 7 months, has helped tremendously. I feel healthier. Like it actually is preventing the risk of other things down the road, heart disease and Alzheimer's, which is connected to not sleeping for years at a time, and all this stuff that they're now figuring out.
It's one of those things that, like, for those women that can take hormone therapy, because there's definitely those that can't out there, but those that can, it sometimes that opens the door to be able to sort of be proactive with the nutrition and the health and the stress management and the sleep, right? That hasn't been accessible. You're a great example of that. But what you're essentially saying that I'm hearing is that knowledge equals informed choice for you as an individual, and it allowed you to advocate for yourself. And I feel like that's got to be the message for all women. And that informed choice might be to try something else, but it just means you actually get to make the decision, right? I've had Heather on the podcast actually. So like, if anyone wants to listen to that episode, she is a good resource.
Yeah, I just feel like I have more information than now, the vast majority of doctors have. And I feel really equipped to be able to make my own decision. And that was just absolutely priceless. And so I started taking estrogen and progesterone about 6-7 months ago. And that has been an absolute game changer. Like, all of the stuff that was coming back, all of the hot flashes and night sweats and everything, all of that went away. The edginess, I was feeling really, really edgy. All of that has gone. And I find that I actually I don't need to be quite so strict and militant with my diet as I was the previous 5 years, that I can have sugar sometimes. And that, like,
I'm super happy to hear that, because
if I drink wine, but I can have a cocktail. So it's like these things that were really off limits to me because of how my body would respond I can now do them again. And that's been really nice.
That's awesome. I'm really pleased to hear that. So that's a great resource, by the way. Go to Heather's website, go to my podcast. It's all linked there, and there's a link to her masterclass there if you're interested, for sure. Okay, last one as we wrap up this episode.
I'd love therapy.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear about this.
I didn't know this was a thing, and I knew of it sort of in the context of if you've had a baby. I knew this was something people did. I don't have kids. I never thought about it. I didn't know. I just didn't understand what the application was for it or why someone would do it. And I have had for many years, since I was in my 20s and I had a back injury, problems with waking up to pee in the middle of the night. And sometimes it's like 4 or 5 times a night. Like, it's a lot. And that is another factor that has really disrupted my sleep. And I was talking to a friend about it, and she was like, you should go to pelvic floor PT. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Why? What's that? And so she explained to me, like, that this is actually like that urinary stuff, not just incontinence after having a baby, but also just frequent urination, nocturia, those kinds of things can all be related to pelvic floor and can be related to things like tight muscles and your fascia, like that actually doing myofascial release in the pelvic floor, just like you would do it on your back or wherever, can actually help with the body sensation of feeling like it has to pee more often than it does, or when you just have a little bit of pee instead of like waiting for your whole bladder to be filled. And so I have been doing that, and I've only done 3 sessions so far, but it has already, after the second session, I went to sleep and I woke up only once that night. And it's been all week this week. I've only woken up once. And that, to me, like, I have not had that in, I don't know,
years.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something I didn't even know about. And I consider a pretty educated person, right? Like, I feel like I know stuff, and I'm like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that is pretty amazing, it turns out, or has been for me, like, that it's been extremely effective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty well informed in it because of my sort of job. The pelvic health physiotherapists often work with trainers, especially postpartum as well and through menopause. But I think a lot of women don't realize that the pelvic floor is a body of muscles. It's like a sling, and it actually attaches to the core at the front, the transversus abdominis, and the back, the multifidus muscles at the back, and the breathing muscles, the diaphragm. And so it all works connected together. And so sometimes going to a pelvic health physiotherapist, they'll get you to start breathing properly again. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And you're like, no, yeah, it does.
It does. And she and I talked about this, my therapist and I talked about this my first visit. And I left feeling like just this rage because women are taught to suck it in. Like we're supposed to look smaller. And so we get this message for our whole lives, like we're supposed to not have a big belly and we're supposed to, appear as small as possible at all times. And so you end up, your default mode, when you don't even realize it, is just sucking it in. And it ends up,
it's on
decades of we aren't breathing right. Like women are not breathing right because we were conditioned to not expand our bellies all the way.
Yep. Not to do belly breathing. Yeah.
And when you don't do belly breathing, your pelvic floor muscle, like that actually affects your pelvic floor muscles. And so there's a connection, between this, I have to wake up 4 times a night to pee and I don't fully use my breath. And so I have this sort of like atrophying and, my muscles are weak when weaker than they should be. And my other muscles are overcompensating. And so then that's creating other problems that cascade. And it comes down to, and there are like how many millions of women are walking around with this problem because we're conditioned to be smaller.
Well, and also, women will walk around with this issue because they are embarrassed by it. And it's a very common condition that shouldn't be normalized. It shouldn't be like you should put up with that. I mean, what should be normalized is that you can get treatment successfully for it.
Yes.
And the treatment is typically actually quite simple, right?
And I also thought it was less that because people are embarrassed. And for me, it was less about embarrassment and more just like, I thought I just had to live with it. Like I thought this was just like what life was. Like I didn't realize like how dysfunctional it actually was. And then how much it was affecting my sleep and affecting then everything else.
And also mental health and mental wellness is tied to women that have incontinence because they don't want to have sex. They don't want to go out. They don't want to run. They don't want to exercise. It cascades.
Am I going to be near a bathroom? Like you have this,
exactly.
And so it prevents you from doing stuff you want to do. And yes. Yeah.
Anyway, oh my God. I mean, I think those 3 things that you ended on are really great things for women to sort of take away and think about as well, because there's everything you said, there's something I recognized in myself as well. For all that menopause is a unique experience, these shared conversations are really helpful and even helpful to me now. And I'm like 4 years post-menopause, right? Like it just still continues to be helpful. Emily, we've come to the end of our time. It was really, really nice to chat with you. I'm so happy that you've decided to be open and share your story. I mean, it's hard to do. We both did it. We've seen the impact it has on other women. It helps me sort of share the message over and over again. Just talk about it more, ladies. You really should, because the more of us talk about it, then the easier this is all going to be for other women. We don't have to be blindsided going into it, right?
And the more that the medical establishment will pay attention and hopefully will change, the more that doctors will actually get an education in menopause care and educate themselves in menopause care. Like if we as women are coming in and having more education than our doctors and demanding that they rise to the occasion, I have to believe that over time this will shift.
I think I've seen a shift already. I think it's moving in the right direction. Fingers crossed it moves quicker though. Emily, right, how can people sort of stay in touch with you, support your work? Like what's the best place
to do that is to sign up for my newsletter. I have a newsletter that is free, that I send out not on a regular schedule. I basically send it out when I feel like it. And maybe that will become more professional later on, but maybe not. I don't know. If you go to emilyonlife.com, there is a pop-up and you can just sign up there. I'm also on Instagram at emilyonlife, although I'm not posting super regularly, but I am there and I do sort of dip in and out. And that is a place to find me.
Yes, for sure. And go and buy a perimenopause cards, menopause cards. They're awesome. And they're funny.
You can find those at emandfriends.com.
And friends, I'll make sure all of this is tagged in the show notes. So if anybody wants those, just head there. And again, Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a great way to kick off season 2. I appreciate you and best of luck with everything that you do moving forward.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like what you hear, then why not subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? You see, when you do this, it helps to raise the profile of my show and attract new listeners. And it also allows me to continue to deliver valuable content with great guests. And in return for you doing that, I will send you my 12-week core-focused program called Abs on Fire as a thank you. Simply drop me an email at amanda@amandathebe.com and I'll wing that your way. Bye.